Fantastic, we can hear you. That's great, thank you. And welcome, Sarah. I know that this is your second session now. We will wait for everyone to join as well. I hope that last week the data fishing exercise was really good. I know it was quite quick, so today we're hoping that we can have a nice slow session and everything. Did everyone get in touch with their mentors? I have sent out all of that information.
Did everyone, did you contact the mentors? Yeah. Everyone, but mine hasn't replied. So I don't know. I can say I am already in touch because I don't have feedback. She hasn't replied.
Okay, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
I know that we do have internal people and external people. We have a couple of people from the US, so just taking to consideration the time difference.
Weekend?
And the weekend as well, yeah. But hopefully everyone will get back to you guys and you can set up your first chat. I really hope that mentee guide is useful. Please do have a read. I have been part of a lot of like different mentorship program, and it's kind of like just here's a person and be mentored by them. And I think like having a bit of think what you want to get out of the mentorship itself would be super useful. If you go into these meetings like quite set up, like you have some questions, you can guide the conversation as well, and it will make it into a really like productive experience. So and if anyone has any like questions or you feel like you haven't been matched with the right person, please just drop me a message and we can have a chat and we can brainstorm and everything. Also, if you don't hear back from your mentor for a long time, maybe just let me know and I can also give them a nudge and everything. And I know that we're still waiting for people to arrive, but I'm going to start introducing Sarah, who is going to be leading our workshop today. We're so lucky to have her with us. And again, like more people will be joining online, but if you want to talk a little bit about your background.
Sure. Okay, hi. I can see the two videos on a few people, so I don't know if I can see everyone in there, but it's nice to finally get to see some faces. I haven't been able to join your previous workshops yet as I've been busy and with my family and stuff. So it's so exciting to finally be able to do so after many weeks and months of anticipation. I am a quantitative ecologist by training. So I did my PhD looking at environmental modeling of wetlands. And I sort of followed my PhD mentor. He was an unofficial mentor, but he was very influential to my growth. And I work for him now. And he sort of moved into infectious disease modeling. And it wasn't as big of a leap as it seems because a lot of the statistical and quantitative skills were really similar. So I guess that's something to think about as you think about mentors and also this training that there's a lot of scope for these skills to take you to a lot of different places. And that's been really fun for me as well to sort of learn in different environments. That's what's brought me here to working for the Kids Institute. But I actually live in Brisbane, which is on the other side of Australia. It's on the East Coast. It's very humid and tropical, which is lovely. Yeah, what else can I say? So I started learning R probably during my PhD. I remember that during my master's and undergraduate, there was 1 or 2 courses that started to teach programming, but it was very challenging the way they taught it. It certainly never made me think that I would do it more or almost exclusively. But here I am all these years later, and I think a big part of that was finding the right resources and communities to access sort of feeling more at home in and comfortable learning these skills. I wonder, is there a way to make it so that all the videos that are on appear? You know, like I think she comes in.
I think when you start sharing your screen, it will pop up and I can put it on gallery view. Okay, so thank you so much for that introduction. And hi, Nima as well, just joined us.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
Good, thank you so much. I hope that you're having a bit of a less busy week this week.
It's not always predictable, but happy to be here to be able to commit at least these 2 hours.
Yeah, no, thank you so much again. It's fantastic. It is a nice way to start the Mondays, just to see everyone here. It's a very lovely way to start. So it is time for us to kick off today's session. I know that we are missing a few people still, but I thought I would start by just sharing my screen. And you all know how much I love surveys by now, so I thought I would just start off with, again, thank you so much for filling them out. And for today's session, again, led by Sarah as well, it's going to be a beautiful, nice introduction to R. I know that within the cohort, we have different skills and backgrounds in R, so maybe for some people, this will be quite like, oh, I know all of this. In that case, we're happy to give you like harder tasks as well. And please put up your hand and unmute and tell us like how you would code some things. So please feel free to jump in and share your experiences as well. You can see here that this was the pre-workshop survey that a lot of people have said that it's still like, it is really, really new. And thank you so much again for filling this out, because then we know how to target this whole workshop. And because GitHub seems to be something that people are really not really familiar with, we thought instead of trying to cram in Introduction to R and GitHub, we're going to cover GitHub in a whole different session. So we have more time to go through it nice and gently, because it is quite a big thing. So with that, I am going to hand over just this one to Sarah to kick things off. And today, if you have any issues or questions in R, then please just let us know. Again, use the reaction function to put up your hand and unmute. Please open up R on your computers as well, because we will be using that later on. But with that, let's kick things off.
Okay. All right. So I want to reiterate one thing Juniper said, and thank you, Juniper, for inviting me, which is that I know that we do have that range of skill sets or familiarity already. And what I'm hoping is that even if we don't cover a lot of complexity in code, which we won't be doing, what we will be doing is sort of giving us a refresh of a good foundation, so that at whatever level you are, you have more confidence that you've got really clarity on the fundamentals of how R works and how to seek help and use snippets of code that are available online and in other places. Because, yeah, there's a lot available out there, and having that foundation of how it really works is going to make it easier to use those things that are available. Okay, I guess I'll get started. I can't see the chat at the same time, but I guess that's what Juniper always does. I'm gonna share my screen. I'm probably gonna be looking down because it's easier on my neck, but I can see you all here on my screen too. So I'm still looking at your lovely faces. You can give me nods or thumbs up or whatever you feel as we go along. Okay, so no. There we go. All right. So this title, as Juniper has already said, is already a little out of date because it's pretty much just introduction to R. However, I am going to begin by giving us some background that I think is also going to be relevant when you guys revisit version control. If you haven't done the entry survey, I think Juniper would still love for you to do so. So I've put the link back here again. Probably easier that Juniper links it in the chat. Okay, so you guys have had a few workshops now. You've talked about data management, project management, ideas of research, and I want to start there. So if we have a problem, I've got a little plague or virus here. I'm not really sure. I don't work in this area. We can imagine it's malaria, whatever that looks like. We have some problem statement. We've got specific questions that we want to ask to address this problem, and data perhaps that's already available or that we need to collect. We are then going to design a set of analyses or models that are going to help us address our question with the data that are available to us. As we continue along our research life cycle here, we are producing some outputs, maybe recommendations or decision guidelines for decision makers. At some point, I'd love to know more about what you are all working on, but you can imagine and fill in the blank here on what your outputs are. Yeah, and that these outputs from our analyses translate to some sort of recommendations or publications or whatever they are. And as I'm sure you guys have already started to learn, this process is not a straight line, it is iterative, and it becomes this circle where we end up revising our questions and collecting more data as our situation changes. And for that reason, it's really important not to think of our analyses and models as a single solitary step within our research life cycle, but rather, oh, I got ahead of myself. Oh, I was on such a good flow too. So within this cycle, you guys have covered a bunch of topics already in previous workshops. And because of what I was previously saying, that we've got this life cycle of research, we need to think about our analysis step as really something that happens not just once within a single research life cycle, but iteratively within the same project. And then, of course, when you start again with new questions. And this is really important. The reason is that if we use tools that make it harder to cycle back and do these analyses over again, it's going to make our work a lot more difficult. So I want to start by now asking you guys to talk to me. I want to hear some of your experiences. I want you to think about the work you've already done or what you're working on now, and when you've had an experience that you either need to, say, run some data processing or cleaning again, or need to reproduce results and you couldn't do so. And if you don't have experience with something like that, think about maybe an imagined scenario. You can talk amongst yourself. Those are in the table together. And then we can share amongst us some experiences. And maybe it'll make it easier. Juniper can kick us off in a few minutes. But I'll leave you to 1 or 2 minutes now to think, talk amongst yourselves, and reflect on this question.
Feel free to have a think. It's kind of like I think during the first workshop, we had a screenshot when you have like a folder and you have a a final version 1, final version 2, final version 3, like all these documents that are quite hard to like understand what the workflow was. And like I work a lot, within the map team and everything. And like sometimes like, especially like when someone gets sick or goes on leave, we have to go into their folders and we need to kind of remake maybe a plot that they have created. And we're like, oh my goodness, which one is the last version of the script? Which one was like what was the process of saving all of this? And like it becomes almost like a detective's work that like which version, which file to use. That's something that pops into my head, like messy folders. How about anyone in the room? In the Dar room? We cannot hear you. I think
that's intentional.
Sarah was saying something.
Intentional. I was told that other workshop leaders called on names randomly. I'm not above doing that.
I don't know, with Harriet and Kokoda, do you guys share scripts sometimes or like data and you have to use each other's scripts in the Dar office?
Yes.
Are there ever issues that arise?
No, not really. Although we don't do it often.
Yeah.
But maybe something that can be close to answering the question is for when I was using Excel to create just a simple map, and every time I would filter a different column, the other map would change because it would only accommodate the filtered data. So then I had to at least save them as pictures first, and then go do another rerun, and then save as a picture again. So maybe that can be
definitely. So I'm hearing that, when you're working in Excel, you've got to refilter and then resave the images that come out every time you make a change. And you need to be very careful manually that you've not made a mistake in sort of naming the file that you save with what filter you used. Yeah. But you also said that you normally don't have any problems. So I'm curious, does that mean that there's something that is working well that you want to share?
Not really. But maybe because it's always been small snippets of code, not a whole chunk of code, yes.
Yeah.
And presumably you guys are in the same office, so you can kind of just nudge each other. Then what did you do with this one? And then you can get the answer. Yes.
Yeah. So scale of the code matters, but also sort of your comfort and proximity to the people that you're working with. Okay, any last thoughts?
Yeah, I can share an experience from a project. So this was a project that had been implemented for a while, and we were at a point where we wanted to evaluate the effectiveness of that project. And at that point, to do that, we realized we needed to have collected certain indicators that hadn't been originally part of the program. So we hadn't captured that data. So that made us not being able to evaluate the program on the parameters that we wanted, and sort of like had to tweak it to look at other different areas. But it was sort of like an eye-opening realization moment for us to start having this comprehensive thinking of what are the different things that we might want to evaluate on from the beginning of the design of the project, so that we make sure that all of the different data points that we are collecting from the start are representative of things that we would want to measure in the course of the project.
That's a great example. I mean, and I think what you're recognizing is that, one solution, and that, is that when we design our projects, we need to really be thinking in advance. What questions do we want to answer, so that you make sure you set it up from the beginning. And then the flip side of that is that you can't always anticipate. So having things set up safely so that you can rerun analyses when you get new data or have new questions is really crucial. It's a good experience. Okay, I think we'll keep going, but feel free to chime in with anything else in the chat if there's something that comes to mind. Okay, so officially the objective for today, and I already deleted the get familiar with version control and Git, because we're not doing that today, but perform basic operations in R is our stated objective. But what I'm hoping we will do is expand our mind a little, that it's not just that we want to perform basic R, it's that what we're trying to do is familiarize ourselves with a range of tools, which include R, which will help us surmount some of the issues that we just discussed, to allow us to have more flexible and generalizable research pipeline. So this is, generalizable, flexible, etc., but also in many cases best practice. So this is the other side of it, and I should have probably left the comic off while I say this, because I think it's important to note, as I talk to a group of, developing researchers, that you guys are going to be leading the way very soon, that frankly, on a global setting, these tools are becoming the baseline of best practice. And so at a minimum, the things that we've talked about so far are talking about why using these tools will help you. I think this comic is very reasonable. I found it during my PhD, and I use it all the time because I made so many mistakes and caused myself so many problems. But beyond helping ourselves and our immediate group, it enables reuse. So that doesn't just mean for yourself in the future, but that is one thing. You're always collaborating with future you. Beyond that, you're collaborating with your team, and you're going to be leaving behind, hopefully, if you write code as opposed to doing things ad hoc that can't be replicated, you'll be able to leave behind to your group and team members things that they can build off of. And that is a really beneficial outcome in terms of science, that we're not just writing a report or a paper, we're leaving behind tools and pipelines to do certain tasks. And the third thing I want to note here, which, I hope that you guys have come across in some of your science education, is that there is a lot of research and discussion in recent years about problems in the scientific literature. This started a lot in psychology. There's a lot of discussion of this in medical fields, but you have this crisis of results that are not able to be reproduced. And there's all kinds of reasons for this that we don't have time to get into. But using some of these tools and best practices are allowing us to make some dent into ensuring that we are working toward most reliable science. Okay, so we're going to have two sections of today. The first will be an intro to R Studio that really has a lot of ideas about how to organize ourselves, because it's a useful infrastructure to interact with R. And the second will be intro to R, and that sort of will allow us to think about things like a reproducible, generalizable workflow. Great. All right, so intro to R Studio. Okay, so this I found quite confusing at the beginning, and still do, because when you're using R, you often are interacting with it through some sort of software. So for many of us, that's RStudio, but they're not the same thing. They're two different languages. They're two different softwares. R is a programming language and a software to interpret that language, whereas RStudio is a user interface to interact with R. So one of the ways that this comes up is that if you have RStudio and R on your machine, which I get to here, you need both installed. If you need to upgrade them, that's two separate upgrades. So you might occasionally get notifications that you have to upgrade your RStudio. That's separate to upgrading your R underneath. So that's just a side note. Makes programming easier to use RStudio, and it's free and open source, both of them. So many sort of computer science types interact with R through its most basic access point. But we're not going to do that because we're not masochists, and we will use the tools available to us. Okay, so we're going to look at this when I open the RStudio, but I just wanted to do it here first before I open it to give us a slight lay of the land. We haven't looked at it before. We have 4 main panels, though these are modifiable. As you get more familiar with the software, you might move them around or hide them. But after many years, I still have mine exactly the same. At the top left, can you see my mouse? Here. We have the text editor or script. So if we think this is quite different than something like Excel, but it's more like, what you would do with a Word document. You can type into it and you can save the document and it becomes our record of what steps we're using. But writing into that place doesn't execute that code. It's just sitting there as a record, sort of like a document. Down here in the bottom left, we have the console. So this is the part that's actually interacting with the R language, executing the code. And the top right, we have a few different things that can appear up here, but the main one that we'll talk about today is the environment. It's basically where objects that you have created are living. And I'm going to come back to that when we look at it in person, but suffice to leave it at that for now. That's sort of like our sandbox. We've made things and they're sitting there ready for us to sort of play with. At the bottom right, we have called the navigation, but it's sort of like the file manager. I find this really useful because you can navigate through your files or look in your folders or open things or save things right from within RStudio. Part of the reason I have it open and almost don't use any other window while I'm working all day long. All right, so we're almost at the demo, but very similar to what Juniper said about, final doc 3 or final doc 3. File organization and naming and file paths are super important to project management. I think you guys talked about some of this in your data management course, and probably, you're all very smart and organized people. But it's still important to remember, and it's very easy to allow this to go by the wayside when you start working with R. And maybe you have a really good system for your Word documents, and then all of a sudden you have 15 R scripts that are untitled 1 to 15 just because you're not used to working with the new language. So remembering this part as well as you move into a new tool. So what we're going to do as well is make use of something that RStudio gives us, which is called projects. And they allow us to have all of our documents in one place and also use relative file paths. So I'm going to show this again when we open RStudio. But basically we have each file on our machine has a location. It's got a file path. So maybe it's in your user folder, then it's maybe in your documents folder in, PhD year 1, what have you. So it's got this whole path. And what we're going to be able to do when we use an RStudio project is put all files related to one project in one place. And then we don't need to assign that whole string in order to locate that file. We can do so just relative to the main project folder. So if that's not clear yet from just the verbal, I hope it will be when I show it. So now we're going to do our demo. So I'm going to take a breath.
Exciting.
Yes. You don't need to open up your RStudios yet because I really want you to be able to watch. And then what we're going to do is we're going to have an exercise afterward where you can try and replicate and work through some of what I've shown. But for now, I want you to just watch and take it in. So down here, oh, you can't see this. I think I need to reshare my screen to share the whole desktop. Okay. So now if I scroll down, yeah. I have a Mac, so this little thing pops up. Here's my RStudio. It's in my, oops. There we go. I'm going to open it. Okay. So the first thing you might be thinking is, I thought there were 4 panels. I only see 3. So I don't have any R scripts open, so it's not showing me one. So I can do that now. I can use this little plus button and say, show me an R script. And now we have something that looks like what I showed you before. We have our R script here, our console down here. It comes with this little preamble telling you what version of R you have installed and that you're using. And down here at this little arrow is where it's ready to receive code prompts. Okay, and then we have my environment, which is empty because I haven't made anything yet. And we have our file panel. Okay, but I'm not going to start writing code yet because I already told you we want to use our studio project. So I am going to show you first a prompt, which I'm not going to go into the details of, but it's get working directory. This is saying, where does R think that I am? So this is where it thinks I am, which is not a useful place for me. Because if I open my file finder, I have a folder here called map.dar, and it would be really useful for me if I was working and creating R scripts in this place. But it's telling me that where it is I don't even know how to find that in my finder. Like, I don't even know how to find that. It's not my desktop, it's not my downloads, it's nothing useful. I don't know where I am. So instead, I'm going to open a new project. My mouse is appearing a little delayed, so I'm up here at the top and I'm going to say File, New Project. So when we come back and we do a session on version control, we're going to look at what this option does. But for today, we're going to use this one. We're going to use a new directory and a new project. Okay, so this already knows where I want to save it because I did a practice run this morning. But if it didn't, then I would browse and navigate through my directories of where I want to save this new project. And I'm going to call it, I guess, Workshop 3, Intro R, something like this. Now again, later, when we do an intro to version control, we're going to look at adding a Git repository. But I'm just noting it now to indicate that there's a lot of useful integration that exists within RStudio to help us make version control like not as huge a leap. But we're not going to do it today. So I'm going to click Create Project. Okay. So once again, it's hidden my script panel because I don't have a script open. But I'll open it just so we have this familiar 4 panels. And we have our 4 panels. And what we can see is that here on the right, it's moved me into my repository. It took me from home to my Dropbox folder, Telephone Kids, map.dar, and here I am in Workshop 3 Intro R. And I'm going to do this get working directory again. and we can see, though I've done poor file management, and there's a space in this folder name. Don't do that. Do as I say and not as I did. Okay, but so this is really helpful because what this means is that when we make new scripts or when we try and load data, it's going to do so from this useful folder, and we're not going to have to go searching around through our whole computer and these long file paths to get to where we need to go. Okay, so let me try and remember what I wanted to show here with the intro to R. Jennifer.
Whilst you're doing that, I thought I would ask, is anyone... Oh, Nemo, you have a question. Please feel free to unmute.
Yeah, sorry, interjecting you, Juniper. Yeah, but I had a question. So is this the same to the command of set work directory, set WD? Is it sort of like the same idea, or is there something fundamentally different with the route that you showed us?
So, okay, so what Nima's referring to is that if I didn't make a project and I left it as it was before, you could say set working directory and copy down this path. And what that would mean is that later when you save or read files, it also looks to this location. This is a legitimate approach. As with almost everything I'm going to show you, there are a million ways to do it. The reason I don't recommend this approach is two reasons. The first is that you can forget to do it. If you open it again, it doesn't stay. If you reopen your project, you'll have to set your working directory each time. You can always say, if you have a script, have it at the top, and that avoids that sort of my location, whatever it is. But this has one downside, and I wonder if someone can think about what it is. Was it Harriet that was talking about sharing code? Was it Harriet?
Yeah, between Kokoda and Harriet.
Between Kokoda and Harriet, you guys were talking about sharing code. Can you think about why this might make it tricky?
I think you're both muted.
I mean, they're not saying anything, but.
Yeah, so this, I think it would, if the other person doesn't have a similar, obviously they're not working on the same directory, so then it wouldn't work for them.
That's exactly right. So maybe they would have the same sort of final destination folder, but probably this path leading up to it will be different. So it's a slightly riskier approach, and it means your code is more dependent on later manual manipulation. So one of the things that our Studio project allows us to do is remove some of that that can make it less easy to reproduce or to share. But it does work. Yeah.
I thought that would have been my question. Whoever has used R before, do you guys create a new project, or that's something that you haven't really been using? You just open it up and you go to your folder and such.
We do create a project. It's like the way she showed. Yeah, we normally create the project like the way she showed.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, great. I mean, the other thing is that often, you might be sharing, as you guys mentioned before, one script or one file. But as projects get more complex, you might have multiple scripts or multiple different folders of different components of your research, and you can have them all together within this repository. And so when you share it, or if later we have it on GitHub with version control, you won't just be sending one script back and forth, you'll be able to be sharing the whole collection of files. Great.
Yeah, I think that sounds good.
All right. So what else do we want to show? So, all right. So over here, our environment, okay. My environment is currently empty, but I think, hold on, let me check what's in.
Well,
Yeah, I want to talk about, before I start writing code into the console and look at saving it and having it appear, we're going to do that in a minute. I want to stay on the idea of project organization, which is sort of a little something I care quite a bit about. So humor me if this is all known and normal, but something I think is really useful to refresh on anyway. So we're inside our RStudio project. We want to do a few things. I'm going to make some new folders. This is usually how I start a new project and new workflow. So first I'll create one that's called data raw. Okay, we can see now that it just appeared here in my folder. If I go to my Finder, we'll be able to see it as well. Here is my repository that was just created. And that folder for data raw also appears. Oh, there's nothing in it. There's nothing in it. Oh, I got an All right. So I'm going to make a few more. But first I'm going to say, why did I call it data raw and not data? I think last time you guys did an exercise where you had a file called routine data, and then you created a new file called routine data cleaned. And I thought that was a great exercise for many reasons, but one of them is that you had to save it as a new file. And I think that's really good practice, that you end up having a place where you don't modify the things that come in there. I think this is really important, especially as you start to learn R and practice, because it's really easy to make mistakes. And even though ultimately the idea is that by learning these tools, you're going to have greater proficiency to make things with making fewer mistakes than by using a point and click interface like Excel, there's still a lot of scope to make mistakes, and you never want to overwrite your raw data. So what I would do if I were you would be to always have a place where that raw data is kept, and then either another folder or another place where you can put manipulated data that you've then saved as a new file. So equally here, you can then make, maybe that'll be like your processed data folder. You could make a folder that has scripts. If you have multiple, then you can keep them organized. They're not appearing. There they are. But really the data raw is the one that I wanted to talk about the most. Are there any comments on that or any ideas about data file organization or things like that?
I would mention that within MAP, again, because there are so many people working, and when you get data raw and you're getting that from a collaborator, you might be getting that through an email. And in the email, maybe your collaborator is describing like where the data has come from or something. You can actually export that email and save it within your project as well. I think this is something I really recommend. Because emails get lost and everything like that. But even that initial couple of emails between collaborators where the data has come from, it's very, very handy to just save it. You can save it as a PDF or like export it. That's just something I would recommend.
I think that's a great point. Well, so I have this data file here. I don't have the cleaned version because I didn't participate in your workshop. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag it into the folder, data raw, and just show that by doing it here, when we come back to the RStudio pane, it has also appeared like magic. Okay. And what we can also do is create a text file. So we can do a lot of things in RStudio that are not R, and we can call this routine data metadata. this data is super cool and important. Here is the vital metadata. Okay, month means this, year means this, whatever information you would have received. So this is a very informative text file, and we can save that with the data, routine data, metadata or something. So I'm not going to give you, overly prescriptive ideas of what should be in here, but it is a really good point that you should save this information together and getting ourselves familiar with the fact that, and we don't need to do this, it's because I'm thinking about R. It's not a text file now. Anyway, getting us familiar with the idea that RStudio handles many different kinds of files and not just R files. Okay, so with that, I'm going to come back here and have you open your RStudio and replicate some of these steps. If you've used projects already, this is not going to be a challenge, but you can help those around you, or you can, play with it a little and come up with any questions. So we'll leave a couple minutes for this. And I want you to, just give it a try and get yourself set up so that when we start writing the code, you have it already.
Oh, good. And if anyone has any questions, just feel free to unmute and you're able to share your screen with us as well, and we can guide you through it. So again, for right now, just start up a new project and a new folder in the called data role, and move your routing data cleaned into that folder. If you're all happy to do
And these little arrows are just me showing the steps that I took. Once you're opened RStudio,
if you're all happy with that. I thought I would just check if people are happy and you have the bandwidth, just put on your cameras, please, because that will also help us a little bit. See if people are shaking their heads at the screen. If you're just holding your head, we'll know that we can check on your well-being, basically, how you're getting on. And I know that a few people joined us a little bit late. So hopefully you're all set up, opening up our studio. If you have any questions, please feel free to let us know.
Yeah. Oh, I can hear you.
So Phoebe, I have asked, but I think Coco Days like doesn't help as well.
Okay, Dar team, just in case whatever you're giggling about would be helpful to everyone else, do you want to share it? Just because I know there's some people that aren't in the room with you.
Nelson. I haven't had a Nelson before. Yeah. How is everyone getting on? We cannot hear you in the Dar office. I don't know if you're aware that you're muted. And I know that, yes?
They ask. They ask. Has anyone done? You are not done.
So typically, we're just creating a project.
Uh-huh.
So once we're done, someone will share the project. So everyone is doing individually.
Fantastic.
One second.
That's all good. Just let us know. Again, everyone is creating a new project on your computers, creating a folder called data raw, and you're placing the routine data CSV file in there.
Yeah, take it, copy it.
And just to check, is Powell, I think he kept dropping out, but Riende, are you able to follow everything?
I'm trying to catch up. I'm sorry, I had terrible network today. I'm trying to catch up.
Shall I step through the steps again? I don't want people to get behind on the first one, so happy to just do it again.
Okay, yes, a quick one, just create a new project and then, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to close this one. Here's my RStudio. So I can just click this button, but maybe you'll have to find the application on your computer first. Okay, ignore this for a second. I gotta close this one that I had made previously. So now I'm just sitting inside the RStudio, but not inside a project, which we can see in this little, this indicator up here in the top right. And because down here, we're not inside any sort of useful subdirectory. So I'm going to say File, New Project. I'm going to say give me a new directory. And I want a new project in that directory. Okay, so I'm going to give this one a different name so that that's helpful. So new workshop 3 project, but really you can name it whatever you want. But think back to the first workshop where you talked about good naming and don't use spaces, not like I have here. Shame. Okay, and then I'm going to click Create Project. So now I'm inside my project and I want to make a new folder. There's many ways to do that. One is to use this Add Folder button in the File pane. And now it's appeared. And the other way is to go directly to your folder. So here is my new Workshop 3 project. And I can also make a folder by just saying new folder or whatever version of that exists on your kind of machine. And, calling this scripts or something. And so you can make that folder in either place and it'll appear. So this needs to refresh for it to appear. And there it is. Similarly, you can copy the data into that folder in just the regular file management way. There's nothing RStudio special about that. So wherever you have your routine data cleaned saved on your machine, you drag it or copy it into this folder. I have it sitting now in my other project. So I could copy it from here. On my machine, I can use Command C. You might have different shortcuts. And then I can copy it into this data raw folder.
So hopefully this makes it quite clear that in that navigation panel, it's kind of connected to your computer. So that's what's happening. If you create a folder there, then on your computer a new folder appears. And it's the same with all the different files as well. And when you click on
just going to stop sharing for a second to look for something to share.
So hopefully that makes sense. Sarah, I saw that your hand went up for a second. Is everything set up? Are you all good? Yes. Fantastic. And Jacqueline, it's fantastic to see you in the office. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm okay.
Great. Everyone is set up in the office?
Yeah. Everything is set up.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And I don't know what a couple of weeks ago I had the pronunciation really well, but now I haven't been practicing it enough. Muende. Oh, Muende. I'm still learning. Can you say it again? Kokoda. Muende. Are you all set up as well?
Is it? She mentioned.
Can we get some thumbs up on whether we have everyone to this stage yet?
Yeah. All good.
I only see one thumbs up.
I think
Okay.
the whole office.
Okay. How about other folks?
Okay, all right. Just a question. How do I edit? I named my folder differently. So how do I edit? I used the ARM folder creation down the environment screen.
Yeah, so that's going to be in the more. So if you go back to the project folder, if you want to rename like the data row,
yes,
click into the tick box, and then the next one.
Right there. Okay. Thank you.
I think on my Windows it comes up as like it properly says next to that icon rename, so you can rename it that way. It might be also worth just showing the more drop down. So over there as well, you can see a couple of commands that drop down, which will be really handy because when we started and there was the get WD function and set WD function, this is the way to also do it as point as click. And I think if you click now set as working directory, then it comes up in your console. And you can see as well that this is how like coding languages happen. And when we talked about Excel as well, when you're pointing and clicking things, there's all this code happening behind the scenes. So that's how you can think about it as well, that like there are some functions that you can point and click within RStudio, but all of that's how you translate it. So it's just a different language.
But I just want to note, you don't need to set this like this. we're in the project, so this is already set. Just as that note. But it's true that one thing I use a lot is the copy or move. So you can move it using just the file manager here. I don't know. I want to move this data out of the folder into the main folder. Now, this folder is now empty and the data is sitting in here. There's a few more here. There's also delete, which I'm not going to click. Okay, but I am going to close this and go back to the other project that I created the first time. And here it is. Okay, so I don't know if we're waiting for anybody else. Is there someone else that you want to ask by name who hasn't heard from?
Powell has dropped out, and he's also based in Zambia, so we'll have to catch up with him probably later.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna close this. Great. So how was that for everyone? Are we happy? Okay. Great. All right, we're gonna move on. So I know in a previous workshop you guys looked at CSV files. So I just wanted to come back to it very briefly to note that there are R functions that allow you to read into R an Excel file. But it can be a little more complicated, as I'm sure you guys are aware, because you're well versed in Excel now. There's functions in Excel. You can use, color coding or all kinds of things. You might have two tables sitting in the same Excel script, in the same file, in the same sheet. You might have a table over here, and in these columns you have a separate table, or you have a plot that's being created in the sheet, or you have multiple sheets, and those sorts of things are very difficult for R to understand. So when you guys had that workshop where you talked about clean data organization, it's really important when you start working with R that you refresh on those best practices. And using the CSV file is part of that. It reads in, it saves the file in this sort of more flat format. But it can also be a risk if you need to have if that information is critical to your data organization, you need to replace that with a more best practice approach. So if you have a color scheme that's encoding, countries, you're going to need to add a new column identifying each country with, text. So I think you guys discussed this already, so I'll move along. I just wanted to make that note. Okay, we've made it. It has been an hour, but I feel like, should we take a break? I feel like we just had a very slow exercise.
Yeah, I think we can keep going.
Keep going. We can take a break in a few minutes. Okay, so we are organized in Excel in our studio now. We haven't played around with writing scripts, but we will in a minute. I wanted to first introduce another main, very important topic. So before we actually talk about packages, I want to note something important. Base R, as it comes installed on your machine, has many different bits of code already ready for you to play with. However, there are lots of people around the world that spend a lot of time, myself included, creating additional software packages that have chunks of code put together in little bite-sized pieces to make executing different functions easier. And those are put together into packages. So these are collections of different bits of code that you can then use. In order to use those bits of code that have been written by somebody else, you install the package into your R session. Those both in base R and in these additional packages that you can install, the way you'll be accessing those bits of code is through functions. So as it says here, they're either from packages or they're already available within base R. And they allow you to do more complicated sets of commands. Something that I didn't really register the first time I opened R. And I think what Juniper showed you about how the point and click for set working directory translates to code, I didn't realize that every time I wrote a word like set WD, there's actually, that's not a magic word. There's all of this code underneath it that is going to be doing what you have asked it to do. This is a powerful realization because eventually, hopefully not too long, if it's useful to you, you guys are going to get to the point where you're not just using the functions created by other people, but creating your own in order to make the tasks that you regularly do more efficient. So that's something to look forward to because it's quite fun.
Yeah, and I think these words we're going to come across quite a lot, like package and function and object. So if you have any questions like, oh, what does this mean again, just please nudge us, because it's something that I think like once you get used to R, it becomes such a natural vocabulary. But if there's any terminology that like, what was that again, just let us know and everything.
And at any point, you can get help using a question mark, which we're going to practice, but there's also a lot of other ways to get help, which we are going to talk about. So, anatomy of a function. We already looked at getWD and setWD. So we've already seen two functions. I'm going to introduce now a third, install.packages. So the dot in this case doesn't have sort of a meaning. It's just within the word. The parentheses, however, is a key sort of language item so you can't use a parentheses in a function name, because what it's doing is it's separating the function name from everything else that comes along with the code phrase. So we're going to open up those parentheses in order to add information inside. So just as we saw with setWD, where inside the parentheses, we put the folder that we wanted to set as our working directory, what we're going to put inside these parentheses is the name of the package that we want to install. So in this case, the argument of this function is the name of the package. We're going to install tidyverse as a package. And the concept I want to introduce, and I'll reiterate here, is that inside the parentheses of a function, you have a or multiple arguments. And if you have multiple, they'll be separated by a comma. So once we've installed our package, in order to use the functions inside the package, we have to bring it in. And this is it's something that I found very confusing. When we install the package, we're not installing it to our project or to our session. We're sort of installing it to our R environment. And I don't have a better explanation for that. It's sort of like installing it into our machine. That might not be technically correct, but I feel that that's a reasonable way to describe it. But if we want to use it in the session that we have open, we need to import it into our active environment. That's why every time we want to use functions from a package within the code we're writing, we need to call library. So to reiterate, you only need to install the package one time, unless then later you do updates or you update your R, you'll have to install again. That's a separate question. In general, you install a package one time, but every time you open up your R, you're going to need to load the library for the package that has the functions you want to use. So in this case, we are going to be using a function called read_CSV. And the arguments of this function is here in quotations. And this should look familiar now. We have our data file inside our data raw folder. So whereas if we hadn't either set the working directory or used a project, here I would have had to say read CSV, I don't remember, users, S Windecker, drop Dropbox, wherever I located this on my machine. Now we can avoid all of this chaos and just say, okay, relative to the project, open this file from this location. Read_CSV is a function from tidyverse. I want to note, because I don't actually use read_CSV, that there is a version of this that does not require you to load tidyverse, and it's available with base R. This is the one that I use. I know that there are some benefits to using the tidyverse version, and we're going to come back to talking about tidyverse versus not tidyverse. So if that's going over our heads, we'll come back to that discussion. I just wanted to quickly note it here in case you've started to use R and you were unfamiliar with this one. If you use this, it's the same. There's some special things that this one does that we're not going to get into, but there is a base R version.
I think, just mentioning base R, that means that that's something that like you don't have to do the library. You don't have that's already in R. But because there's so many people working on, all these different packages and all these different functions, there's so many of them. So like on my computer, I'm pretty sure I would have about maybe 50 packages. And that would be actually a lot of memory to like load in all those functions. I don't really need it. Like if there's one package that I'm only using like maybe for one function, that doesn't need to be loaded. So that's why also kind of like we have all these toolbox available that are getting installed, but we do have to like load in that toolbox in order to like get to those functions. Because otherwise it would just take a long time and a lot of memory to load in everything all the time. Yeah. And
does anyone here already use tidyverse? Some nodding.
Yeah, whenever I use tidyverse.
Yeah.
Some of us.
So, okay, so we're going to come back to some conversations about tidyverse later. For those that aren't familiar already, that's totally fine. It is a collection of useful functions and packages that allow us to do a lot of data cleaning and processing, which is sort of what we're focusing on at the moment, which is why we're demonstrating it to start with. Okay, so I'm going to now go back to the RStudio and do some demo installing some packages and writing some bits of code.
And I would mention with this function bit that, when we were using functions or like operations in Excel, that's how it looked like, right? When you used like the sum. So you said equal, sum, and bracket. And in the brackets, you clicked on cells to select those. So that one's called a function as well. So it's kind of the same like architecture, that it's kind of like there's something happening, there's a word, that's kind of like the actual function. And then there's the bracket. And this is very true for a lot of coding languages as well, that you can recognize this structure.
Excellent. So I'm going to click to another pane here. So we were looking at files. I'm going to click on packages. So I have a lot here because I use a lot of different things previously, but I wanted to show, if I can find it, base. This is what we're saying when we're talking about base R. When we install R, we get all of the functions that are included with this, basically this package. So we don't need to load it, like we don't need to say library base. That's not a thing we need to do, because when we open R, it's sort of automatically ticked. But I just wanted to note that in case it's confusing, that there's all of these functions that already exist and they're magic. They're not magic. They're just a different package that was already written and comes installed ready. Okay, so I'm going to close this script. We're not going to use it right now yet. And I'm just going to work in the console. So first, I'm going to show you the code that we had on the slide. So as we can see, as I start typing, RStudio very helpfully has given me a suggestion. Based on what I've typed, it says, are you looking for one of these? So I can be lazy and say, oh yes, and click enter, and it's put that together for me. Similarly, I can be lazy and say, I don't remember what argument I need. I'm going to click tab. On my machine, it's tab. And what it's done is given me now a list of all these different packages, which I might want to include as an argument to this function. I don't want to click on one of these because that's not what I want. I would rather type mine. So I'm going to type it in. I'm going to use quotation marks. I want to note here, you can either use single. Is this big enough? Should I go bigger? Big, right? Too big? I don't think it's too big. Okay. So I'm going to say single, not there. Inside the parentheses, you can either use single or you can use double. I prefer single because there's just less visual clutter. But it's important to note that sometimes you need both because you'll have an argument with double, and then inside of that, there's another thing that has, so you can nest quotation marks as well. So that's when it might be useful to use one versus another, but in general, you can choose. So the package I want to write is, I don't remember how to spell it, but let's try this. Okay, so we've gotten a note here, and let's open it up. It says, this is not available for this version of R. Okay, blah, 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 blah. Perhaps you meant tidyverse with a lowercase t. So this is a nice, pretty easy to understand warning. It's not always the case. If it was a more esoteric package, it might not be able to guess what I was looking for. But in this case, it was right. It guessed what I was looking for. I want to note, sometimes when it tells you that a package is not available for this version of R, what it means is that you need to update your software. But that's not always what it means. But in any case, there you go. So I'm going to click this now, and this time it's working. I need an internet connection to install the package. It's done this for me. And what we're going to do now is look over here at my packages. I can use this little search panel. And there it is. Okay, so that's great. It's sitting here for me. And now I am going to uninstall it using this little X in order to show you another way to install the package. Another way to install is to use this button. And as Juniper showed you, we know that underneath the hood, this is doing the same thing as we already did with the text. But I often do this because it's lazy. So that's what I'm looking for. What we can see here is a few other things that we ignored in our basic command because we decided to go with the default. But because using this visual interface, it's showing us what those default options are. So we have two more options here, where to install the package from and where to install it to, as well as whether we install the things that it depends upon. So I remember early in my PhD, I don't remember why I thought this was a good idea, but I wanted to change the library and install my packages to some other place. I think I'd read about it like on a blog, but this was for like fancy software people who could manage all of the repercussions of this. And I got myself into a lot of trouble because it was all very complex. So I'm not the best person to explain to you what it means or what the repercussions are. except to say that when you install packages, they go somewhere on your machine. When you reinstall your R, you will need to reinstall your packages, and can cause a lot of headaches depending on what packages you have if you mess with where they are located.
I actually set it up with my Dropbox.
I think that's
So it went to the cloud. So afterwards, like it could reconnect, but again, like it was always depending on having internet connection. So I remember that having issues with that one as well. Yeah.
Okay, so the other thing that's here, and then after this, we'll take a break before we give it a try. I think we're probably starting to get drained, all of us, is where we install it from. So some packages, so CRAN is basically an online repository for packages. If at some point you become a package developer, what you'll do is submit your package to CRAN. They'll review it, do lots of checks, make it all nice and, checked, and then put it up onto their repository for other people to install. But sometimes you want to install, for example, an older version of a package. And for that, you might manually download the file. And then in that case, you can click, I want to use a file, and it'll navigate you to where that file is saved on your machine. In general, that won't be necessary, but if you come across a need, I just want you to have this vocabulary in your mind. Similarly, it's almost always important to have the dependencies. As you can imagine from the name, it means that some packages rely on other packages, like a house of cards of developers, and they're relying on the work of everybody else. So if you don't have one of the other functions that the package depends on, you won't be able to use it appropriately. Sometimes you don't want that, but most of the time you do. So I'm going to install again this way. The same thing has happened, and we have seen it appear. The last thing I'm going to show you before we break is we started talking about doing library calls. So I'm going to show you the point and click version, which is if I click this box, it has attached the package by running library, which what we now know means that in order to do this, we could equally have just written library ourselves. And then it gives you a range of messages that for now we're going to disregard. So on that note, let's take a breath and take a break, and then we can come back for questions and for some practice. So maybe take 3 minutes?
3 minutes, if that's enough for people. And in those 3 minutes, if anyone is having any issues right now, please let us know. Just give us a shout. And maybe we can just chat in the meantime as well, that like we talked about like our first experiences about being exposed to R. And I think that's why like your approach is so nice and kind and everything, because like sometimes it's actually like quite scary and like jumping through like all these terminologies, and that's when it becomes kind of scary and everything. But it's nice and gentle now, so hopefully it's all good. Everyone online as well, I really hope that everything is all good and set up. If you'd like, All good?
Sorry, Jennifer.
Yep.
Can you share your screen? There's something we want to compare that we're not seeing.
Yeah, sorry, I'll share again.
What would you like?
Yeah. So for the packages, we can just see the version 2.00. We're not seeing 0.52 on our side. Maybe is there something we're not doing right?
Are you saying that your version of Tidyverse is 0.5?
We are just seeing 2.00. Yeah, for Tidyverse. Then
You mean
What is, are these two these are different packages.
Okay.
We were wondering about these two packages, Tidyverse and Tidyverse. Okay, we were mistaken.
I didn't hear all of
But
that.
it looks the same. Tidyverse and
You're welcome to share your screen.
Yeah,
You have
you want to
to
share your screen?
Are you going to share? Because I didn't.
you should have like within Zoom. It's at the bottom. Fantastic. Yeah, Tidyverse is there, and it's version 2.00. So it's the same version. Everything has been installed beautifully.
Yeah. It might be that what you're referring to is that in my package pane, there was a bunch of other packages listed. Those are just because the RStudio, where the packages are installed is sort of the same across all your different projects. There's not a special, unless you set it up this way, which you can, there's not a special place to install the packages specific to a project, which is why, even though we just opened this project anew, all of the packages that I have used in various projects over time are sitting in my packages panel. And it's not empty like yours is, because all of the ones that have been installed on my machine are potentially available to me to use in this project. But in order to sort of activate them to be used in this project, I have to use the library call in order to import that package into this project.
All good?
While we're on that note, it's somewhat of a more advanced topic, but I think it's really crucial. So I just want to give a short sort of note about how about package versions. So as you guys were looking, you could see that you have Tidyverse 2.0 or whatever. So let's say you start working on a project, you use the functions within the package as is, and you set up all your code very carefully. And let's say, I don't know when, 6 months, 2 years, 5 years, the package is constantly in development. So the one that you have installed on your machine, you're going to still be using that version. And your code is going to be written and you will have tested it with that version. If you share this script with a colleague, or you reopen the same file 5 years later, and in the meantime, you've updated the version of the package, it's very likely, I don't want to say possible, I want to say likely, that there will be things that break because the package has updated in ways that make some bits of how you've written your code out of date. This isn't going to be as big an issue when, say, you're using the most common Tidyverse functions for data manipulation, for example. But even still, it does happen because all of these packages, they're not static. In fact, if you're using a static package, it's more of a risk because all packages have dependencies. And if those dependencies are being updated and the package itself is not being retested with those dependencies, anyway, things can break really easily, more easily than we want to expect. So there's a variety of different tools out there to help with package versioning, which we won't have time to get into, but I wanted to mention it so that you have an awareness of this as a concept. You run into people talking about different approaches to this problem, you're aware.
That's
Okay.
good.
Launching back in, we are going to, okay, so just to recap, a little Zoom window in the way. Okay, just to recap, I showed 2 ways to install a package. We looked at how to load the package, and now I want you guys to try it. Oh wait, there's one other thing I didn't do. I didn't do this, so I will do it, and then we can try it. So here in my console, I'm going to try our read_CSV function. So I'm going to start to type it, read. So we can see there, read.csv. It's recommending that one. As I mentioned, that's the base R version of this function. It works fine. We're going to use this one. What this little helpful yellow panel is opening is all of the different various arguments that we could use to specify. So we're not going to go into this now, but in the future, if there's some problematic file that you need to read in a special way, you might need to look into some of these arguments. And to do so, I'm going to scroll back to the front of this and do that question mark like I showed you in the slide. And what's going to pop up is here in the help panel, information related to this function. So it's got a description. It shows you how to use it. Now, the really important thing here, not read_lim, read_CSV. So if you'll remember from my slide, or I'll type it in here in the meantime, read_CSV. And now I need to write the location of my file. Oh, I wanted to show something. Hold on, I'll do this after. If we remember from my slide, the only thing I have written in here is the location of the file in parentheses, in quotation marks. However, in the help panel, we have all of these different arguments. So why could I get away with writing read_CSV with only the file? Does anyone know? Okay, it wasn't a rhetorical question. If you know, also say it out loud. Okay, I see mouths moving, but no one's feeling brave. I'll forge ahead. The reason is that all of these other arguments are optional. So what we're seeing here is that this first word is the argument name. Then we have an equal sign, and we have the value of the argument. So what we've looked at so far is only single argument functions. We practiced install.packages with just the package name, but we can have multiple arguments and they're separated by commas. And we can name the arguments like this. So instead of saying install.packages and just saying tidyverse, we could say, oops, I'm not actually sure what the, I'm going to come back to that. We can say file equals the name of the location of our file, or we can just say the location of our file. But all the rest of these arguments are only optional So if we don't specify them, they're going to use the defaults that are listed here. So I'm going into this because if you look at a help file of a function, you need to be able to understand what you're looking at, which is to say which arguments are required, which arguments are optional, and what the arguments are called. So if we scroll down, if this is a help file that shows many different functions together, here it's explaining all of these arguments. First one, which is file, and it's telling you exactly what needs to be in there and what's acceptable. And then it goes on to explain all of these other arguments. Now, some of the most useful that I find is all the way down at the bottom are examples. They're showing here a lot of different examples that maybe aren't that helpful. They're very complicated. Why? This is why I use read.csv. It's not necessary. Anyway, but there are examples here, okay? And that's it. Okay, so to summarize, access the help file using the question mark. Arguments are listed here as the first word after the comma. After the equal sign is the default argument value, and non-optional arguments don't have a default listed. Okay, so now I'm going to try and use the function.
Exciting.
So I'm going to say read underscore CSV. I'm going to say file equals, but we don't have to, but I just wanted to show you what that looks like. And now I need to put in the location of my file. So I'm going to try and find it here. I think it's at this place. Routine data cleaned. And we have an error. Okay, so it's telling me this file does not exist. All right, so one thing that I can do to try and debug this error, to go to File and Cheat and check. There's two problems with what I've written. Can anyone see them? You put it in the chat.
Unmute, put it in the chat. What do we need to change? It's one of the key things in R to be able to like troubleshoot things.
So the file is routine data.csv. That's the one we're trying to read. But the
Perfect.
one that called was routine underscore data underscore cleaned. So you have to replace it with the correct name.
Great. Okay, so that was the first error. What's the second error? It was a bit picky.
And I think also the work is it the working directory.
The working directory, yeah, so kind of. So data underscore raw is not a folder in my working directory because the folder is data dash raw.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So I will do it again. Read underscore CSV. I won't use that this time. We don't need to. Data raw routine data.csv. Okay, so this is very exciting. It has read my data and spit it directly into the console. So just like the other commands that we ran, which produce outcomes that sit here in the console, by running this line here, it gives us this summary of our file inside the console. I want to show you one more thing before I have you break and try it. Juniper pointed out that I used a shortcut that I forgot to mention because I find it so natural. On your keyboard, if you use the up key, boop, like magic, the last command that you ran will appear. So when I had made the mistake and I just did it again, I just clicked up again and it went backward in history. If instead of writing it again, I had pressed the up key, then I could just go here and edit it without writing it again from scratch. All right, so what I want you to do now, practice. Please make an practice using up key. Get this command. So I want you to install Tidyverse in one or both of the ways that we looked at. I want you to load it using one or both of the ways that we looked at. And then I want you to try running the read_CSV line of code. And if you have time, I want you to take a look at the help file and you can practice using that up key. And you can also go down. So if you go like up 1, 2, 3, and it goes back 3 steps, you can go, yeah, you can click through your command history. It's very useful. Okay, so I'm going to leave you to do that for a few minutes.
Yeah, so please, everyone, load in your exciting cleaned data. And whilst you're practicing, if people who are really used to doing this and everything, put in like your version, how you would like read it in, and you can also share your screen later on, and you can show any other way of like reading it in.
In the meantime, you can help your peers.
Yes. And anyone online as well, just give us a shout, like how you're doing. If you need a hand, if there's anything, please just let us know.
Juniper, sorry. Sorry, I'm using a different PC today. I'm trying to locate where you had posted where we have our cloud folder for the data.
Good question. Maybe we can just put the link.
I already have that. I will put it in the chat.
Yes, you had thrown it in the chat last time, or it was in the WhatsApp group. I've been checking the WhatsApp group. I couldn't see the link.
So I'm just putting it into the Zoom chat. That takes you to, well, that link takes you to workshop 3. So you need to go to the main workshop.
Workshop one.
Zoom calendar, right? Okay. Good. Live.
No.
I will send you a link in the chat, in the Zoom chat. Can you see
Okay,
it?
that's fine. Thank you.
And within that folder, that takes you to workshop one. And within workshop one, we have the data folder. And within that one, we have the routine data, what we use for the Excel exercises.
Did you say you've posted in the Zoom chat box?
Yes. So it is in our Zoom chat. When are you using the Zoom installed software, or are you using it from your browser?
I think it's from my browser.
So even in your browser, at the bottom, you should be able to see like participants, chat, react, share. And if you click on the chat icon, that's when you will see the chat pop up, usually on the right side.
Okay, I'm able to see the chat. Sarah had posted, the new had posted an instruction, but I haven't seen yet the link. Okay, it has come now. I'm sorry, my network is terrible today.
No, that's fine.
And thank you.
All good.
I'm sorry.
No worries. If you'd like, I can actually just get a file into the chat as well if you're having trouble with the connection.
Actually, you'll be able to do other exploration even if you don't have the file. So you can use the question mark read underscore CSV to look at the help file, even if you don't, have the file to actually load it in. So don't worry too much if you can't get it. The more important is to be inside the R Studio.
And I did put the CSV into the chat as well, just in case. But
DAR group, how are you guys doing? You have your heads all down. I'm curious. We can't hear you yet, though.
I'm muted.
How are you guys going?
Yes.
Good?
Yeah, we are muted. We can hear you.
Okay. How are you going with the activity?
We are struggling here. Has anyone done?
Shall I stop sharing and you can share your screen again?
would you like to share your screen and show if you're getting any error messages or how it's looking?
So the only issue
Yours is better.
no, yeah, this one. The ones that have worked, the ones that have worked have been successful, but then for Jacqueline,
Errors.
no, there's no errors, but the installing the TDBus, they're saying it's not available for the R version, and the R version is up to date, so.
Is out of date?
No, it's up to date.
Oh, it's up to date. Will you share the screen on that one? Just because it's probably going to be instructive for other folks in the future, and more than just this scenario. So.
So again, at the very bottom of Zoom, you should have the share button. It's green. So if you click that, then you're sharing your screen.
Can you see the share screen button?
One moment, please.
Okay.
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 Sure. What error have I made?
So what I can see.
I copied the path.
Uh-huh.
And put it here, and then I entered to run in the console.
Yeah.
And then it's giving me error.
It's also a macro file.
Yeah. Did you download the CSV file?
Yes, I downloaded it. I've put it in here.
Can you
Oh,
show
sorry,
us?
you can't see.
Can you show us? Can you click data row map project?
Sorry?
Yeah, just there in your file pane. Can you click?
Okay, I have to put it here or in my folder, like in the documents.
Exactly. So if you
in the documents.
Yeah, if you go to your Finder window where you save files, you need to move. You want to move the file there.
Okay, I copy this.
Can you show us in your Finder where the CSV file is located?
Finder.
Another word that's
it's kind of like File Explorer.
Your File Explorer, like on
File
your
Explorer
computer. That's
under environment.
Not in our studio, like just on your machine.
It's literally just your folder. So we want to be able to find where your CSV.
Yes, where File Explorer is under console or under environment or the navigation window.
So it's not actually part of our studio. We're saying normally, if you don't have our studio open, how do you look through your files and documents?
Okay. I go direct to my okay, let me just reshare. Stop this one. Okay, this is where it is. So
Perfect.
I copy this path.
Well, so first, yeah, it's an Excel file. Can you change
Copy as a path.
Maybe
I change it to
copy
CSV.
the file. Yeah, why don't you double click and open the file?
It might just take a second.
Yeah.
So, you know, that navigation panel?
Yes, CSV.
That's
I change it to CSV. Okay.
Yeah, you can do file save as. If you've got it open, you can
Now,
do.
there are a lot of CSVs here. Which one do I go for? CSV, comma delimited?
Yes.
I don't know if the screen share is frozen or not, but we can't see that, I think.
Okay. Let me share again.
Okay, great. Yeah. So, yeah, down in the drop down, you can go to, I can't see it, but there should be CSV.
So
Yeah, it's CSV.
is this
Just a little
comma
higher.
delimited? This one?
Yeah,
This one?
perfect. Click that one.
And
And in the
save.
file name, wait. In the file name, maybe just change the file name. Just right above, yeah, and get rid of the space parentheses 2. So just delete that part.
Okay.
Yeah, perfect. Now there's no spaces in the name. So
Yes.
the other thing you could do is if you go to more options, you should be able to save it to a different location just below.
I think it's actually when you click on malaria docs.
Oh, yeah.
That's what
Okay, so are you able to find where you created your RStudio project?
Mm-hmm.
You know where?
Let me
it
find
is?
time. Let me find time
Yeah,
where
yeah.
I put it.
The idea would be that you create your RStudio project in a location that makes sense. So maybe you have a document folder and it's inside malaria doc. This seems to be somewhere that makes sense to you to have this data. So it probably would have made sense to create your project in this location. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Let me just do that and let others share.
So what we're going to do one day is we're going to keep going, but we can stay on the line after with you to finish troubleshooting that so you get there. But I want to continue with everyone else briefly and we can come back.
Please. Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to keep going. So we explored some of these things and hopefully what we have encountered. Wait, I wanted to show something else. Okay, so I want to show you something else now. In the same manner that we've been looking at multiple ways to install or to load library, I want to show you another thing, which is that if I click this CSV, boop, it's giving us this nice little shortcut to import the data set. It's sort of overly large. It's kind of hard to read. Give me a second. I'm just going to make this smaller so that. Okay. So it's giving me some things here. It's got the UL, it previews, it's got a name, it's got various options, and it's got a code preview for what it's doing. So we can see that if we get rid of this, the code preview has changed and we don't have column names anymore. And the way to do that in the code is to say call names is false. But in our case, the first row are column names, so we want to keep that clicked. And because it's the default, it's not sitting here as call names equals true. It doesn't need to be specified because it's the default. If you had a different kind of file that wasn't comma delimited, but maybe tab delimited, then you could have a different version. But of course, because our file it doesn't know how to read that, and the preview looks a bit wonky. So the other thing is that this name is how you will save the item. Now, what we have practiced so far is just reading the data and it appears in the console, but it hasn't appeared in our environment. I didn't show you that, but up here in your environment, it didn't appear. If instead we assign it, which we're going to learn to do in a minute, we can give it a name. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to show you something else first, but I wanted to just show you that you can import the data by clicking it as well. All right, so I do want to make sure I get a few more thoughts in before we run out of time. This part's really important. So what we've practiced so far is executing code directly into the console. And this doesn't save it as an object that you can use later. It's like a flash in the pan. It sits there in the console, it appears, you can look at it, but you can't then do other things with it. I will come back to that. So to save the code you've written, you actually need to write it into the script file because code written in the console isn't saved. And if you want to retain the object that's created with the code, you need to assign it to a value using the assignment operator. So at the moment, we were just doing read CSV. We haven't assigned that to any object. So it just appeared in our console. So if we want to save it as an object and then do other things to it, we have to assign it. So here's our function. It's got our parentheses. We have our argument, which in this case is our data file. And if we want to save this as an object, we add this little arrow and we give it a name. So we're not going to do this exercise. I'm just going to demonstrate because we're running low on time, but it's very similar to what we've done. So I'm going to use the up arrow again to get my read underscore CSV. And now I'm going to give this a name and make my little arrow. And that's two different, this isn't one thing. It's actually these two different keys on the keyboard that produce the arrow. So when I do that, it appears up here as a data object. So this is really exciting because now we can do other things with this data object. I also noted on that slide the difference between running code in the script versus the console. So because right now we've been running it here, we don't have any of this saved. If we want to do other things and share this with a colleague, we don't have anything to give them to show what we've done. So now we're going to make our script and we're going to write our code. We need to start by using the package that we wrote. And then we're going to say, I want to create an object. I want to assign it the value that comes from running this line of code. Routine data. Now, at the moment, this has not been saved. Okay, so it doesn't appear in our repository. I'm going to save it and give it a name. I'm going to put it in script. Call it data cleaning. Okay, now I want to show you something really important. If I change this script and call this, I don't know, malaria data, and save, and then I want to do other things, and I go into my console, and I want to say, show me malaria data. It doesn't know what this object is. The reason for that is that all we've done is written the code here as if this is a Word document. It's just saving the information, the code that we want to have used. But the reality is, in order to use those objects in additional code, they need to have been run into our environment. So we can do that by saying this run line, and then we can see it appear here. Or the shortcut, depending on your machine, is Command or Control Enter. So I want to give you time to practice that, but you're going to have to do it on your own. What I want to just reiterate is this, because it's really crucial and not that intuitive. You can execute code directly into the console, but it doesn't appear in your environment necessarily, and it's not saved in your script to share with your colleagues. So alternatively, you can execute code by writing it in the script and then running the code using Command Enter or Control Enter, depending on your machine. To save the code, you can't just write it in the console. You have to write it in the script and save the file. And to retain an object, you need to assign it something and also put it in your script. Okay, I'm officially out of time. So I think I want to conclude with two thoughts, which is not filter. You guys can take a look at this later. With this thought, because we started this conversation and I wanted to come back to it very quickly. Tidyverse does not equal R. There's a lot of useful resources within the Tidyverse universe of packages that are really handy for data processing. So a lot of what you're going to find online is going to point you to a Tidyverse function. It's a very useful resource. It has a huge toolbox of functions that are very intuitively named. And when you look through these slides later, you're going to look at the code that is used to filter, and you're going to see that it's quite intuitive how it's asking you to do so. Well, it's more intuitive if I showed you the base R way, which doesn't make a lot of sense intuitively. So trust me that it's more intuitive than the base R way. However, there's a downside. The syntax is not the same as R. They got away with this because they're very big and lots of developers, and they have created such a large universe of resources that it makes it worthwhile to learn that approach. However, if it's the first thing you're learning, which it might be, you need to keep in mind that it's not exactly the same as how you write stuff in base R, and therefore in a lot of other packages. So eventually, it'll be worthwhile to get more familiarity with some of the base R syntax, styling and syntax, and to remember that the rules aren't exactly the same for how you deal with punctuation. I just wanted to put that out there because it's very ubiquitous and it's very useful, but it has that downside. And then very importantly, one of the best things about using R as researchers is that there's a big community. So software engineers and sort of those kinds of people, they don't use R that much. And one of the benefits of using R is that a lot of researchers use it. It's a language that's commonly used by people who aren't computer scientists. So there's a lot of help online. We didn't have a chance to Google error messages on Stack Overflow. Not on Stack Overflow. Google error messages and look at the different kinds of answers available online. But believe me when I say, and you can try this for yourself, there's a lot out there. And part of the reason is that a lot of novices and non-computer scientists use this language. And this is just a cursory look at some of the communities I could find. Our Ladies has a lot of chapters across the continent, not just for women. The idea is to be a welcoming space for people who are otherwise underrepresented in programming type language communities. And in general, I want to encourage you that the R community is very welcoming, and that's one of the best parts of investing in this language compared to others that more sort of sciencey, computer sciencey types would prefer. So that's what we have time for. And you're going to have the slides to be able to take a look at and go from there. And hopefully for those who are already familiar, this was a useful sort of cover over some of the complexities of getting used to R. And for those that are novices, it was enough to get started as you guys continue on in your data exploration. That's it.
Yeah, I think if you're happy to unmute and just a round of applause for a beautiful like introduction to R. I hope that that was really good for everyone, and just a massive thanks for Sarah for like this lovely workshop. Yeah, that would be really nice. It is so hard with a hybrid format, and we were all saying that we want to be there.
I know. We're like,
Yes. Yeah, but I really hope this was useful, and thank you so much again. And with that, we are going to stay on the line for a bit longer, but I just want to give a shout out. So I'm going to start sharing my
and anyone who wants to, we're happy to stick around and answer additional questions, but I didn't want to keep everyone, so I wanted to stop there. Yeah.
Yes. And the recording will be available as well. So anyone who has to run, thank you so much for joining us today. Just so I give a quick shout out. Last week, I have put everyone in touch with your mentor. I really hope that you're going to have a wonderful experience from this. Again, as we mentioned, to provide a little bit of structure, there is that guidance for mentees document. I really hope that please read it, and definitely read it before your first chat. I included some questions for yourself to reflect on, like what do you want to get out of this mentorship? And please fill out that mentorship agreement, which is at the bottom. You can just copy it out into another Google Docs document or Word document, and hopefully that will guide you and your mentor to set out some clear goals and like how you're going to make the most out of this opportunity. And again, this is all on you. So I will be asking the mentors, like, has your mentee reached out to you? And I will be following up on that, but it is your responsibility to set up your first chats. And, if there are any issues, just give me a shout, and we can also like look for other mentors as well if there's anything that comes up. I would definitely please discuss your mentors' availabilities, because this will fluctuate, and yours as well. I'm sure that there will be months when you're busier or something. Just tell them, that like, oh, March is going to be absolutely crazy hectic, so maybe we can skip a couple of meetings or something like that. So just, again, clear communication, that will be really handy. So after this workshop, please set up your first chat with your mentor. Please fill out the surveys, because those are really helpful as we are getting ready for the next session, which will be data wrangling in R. So this session was super lovely to kind of like get used to it, get ready to read in your data. And in the next session, which will be led by Gloria, we're going to start wrangling data. And hopefully what will emerge from all these different tasks in Excel and in R is that in R, hopefully everything is going to be much nicer and easier than Excel. Yes, soon we'll get there. So hopefully that's the direction we're heading in. Whoever is already used to R and everything, all the tasks that we had to do during the Excel module, we already have the R scripts as well, which drop down on the website. So please give that a go and make up beautiful plots if you're already familiar with ggplot. And then during the next session, you can show it as well. But for everyone else, please keep using R and get you ready. And any questions, note them down, and then at the next session, put your hand up that, I tried to do this, but it didn't work. Just please let us know. And I did want to ask, would you guys like to have another networking session? Because I think it was fantastic the last time. And I think Phoebe was really lovely and said that like, oh, it would be nice to have another one as well. So I wanted to check maybe this week, next week, if you guys just want to have a chat with each other on another morning. feel free to unmute. If there are any days, last time it was on a Wednesday, we can do it on a Friday. We cannot hear you.
Next week. I think this will be fine on my end. I don't know for the rest of the team.
Yeah. Okay, for me next week.
Next week is Friday. Does that sound good?
Next week?
Yep. Next Friday, 10 a.m. your time.
Next week, Friday.
Yep.
Yeah, that sounds okay.
Okay.
How the others?
Nemo, do you have any preference? I think last time you weren't able to join, so what is your time as well? Next Friday.
I think Fridays work better for me because it's towards the end of the week, so there's a bit more time there. And next week preferably, if that works for everyone else.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I will set it up, send out a calendar invite, and whoever can make it, again, like last time, we just went into breakout rooms and people just talked to each other for 10 minutes and then we rotated because it's also like we have so much material to go through during the workshops, but it's also important just to like get to know each other and everything. So I will set that one up. And we are getting ready for workshop, and just a reminder again, like we have removed Git for this version, this workshop, but for the future, please make sure that it's installed Git and register on GitHub, which is the website itself. We will use it in the future. With that, I'm going to say huge thank you for everyone joining, and once again for a lovely, kind, gentle introduction to our yes, whoever needs to go, please feel free to go. Whoever has any questions or wants to chat with us, please stay on. Otherwise, many thanks again.
Thank you so much. Very helpful.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Okay,
Miranda. I'm still struggling. I don't know why.
are you there? Did you want to share your screen again?
Yes, I'm there. I'm
Okay,
there.
great.
I'm sorry today the network wasn't so good. Maybe one thing, I did not I did not get the working directorate. Is that a mistake I made?
No, so if you want to share your screen again, we had gotten up to the point of saving the CSV file into your malaria something document folder.
Okay, so I changed the CSV. I had to put it in the map project, the actual project for the whole program.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so now are you able to see my screen?
I can see it. So can you go back to what you were showing us before, the file viewer thing?
Okay. May I go there? Okay, map meridian. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So you have your data saved there, and you have your project. That's excellent. So so the data row map project, that's the name you chose for your raw data folder. Is that right?
Yes, that's the one I had put in our studio.
Okay, great.
But it's empty.
So is that
It's empty.
Yeah.
I haven't put anything.
Okay.
This
So-
data, I guess it's supposed to be in here, right?
Yeah, you should just be able to drag it into the folder.
There we go.
Okay.
Right.
So double click the
Yes.
folder and let's double check that it's in there.
Yes,
Great.
it's in there.
So if you now go back to RStudio,
Okay, in the console.
I think, so if you go back to your share screen option, you should be able to say share whole desktop instead of just one screen, and then we'll be able to follow you when you move windows. Okay, so we're inside your project. If you click in your data folder now, you click the folder. Excellent,
Yes.
your data's there. So now, rather than copying your location of your file as you were doing before, what you do now is if you go to your console, you can type read.csv.
This one?
Yep.
I click on it.
Yeah, you can click it. All right, and then you want to use the quotation mark.
I beg your pardon?
The quotation marks, either the double
Yes.
or the single.
Yes.
Can you
I keep them?
No, you should type it.
Sorry?
Yeah,
I remove them?
No, inside the
like-
parentheses, the quotation marks. So Juniper just posted in the chat that the quotation marks are the little notches that you would use around text. So yeah, you're inside the parentheses and you need to type the quotation mark. It should be like shift and then, yes, perfect. And now you don't need to put the whole file path. You want to put the name of the folder because it's already looking inside your project. So it's looking inside map malaria. Now you need to tell it, look inside my data folder. So you need to type the name of the data folder. So data, the folder, not just the file.
The folder, not the file?
Also the file,
the
but first
folder.
the folder. So the
Okay,
data.
the folder is this
Not that
one.
one. That is a folder, but that is the folder of your project. So it already knows to look inside the project. So you need to
data.
that's it. Yes. Okay, now you need to do a forward slash, or is it sometimes a back?
Forward slash?
I think it's backwards.
If you have a Windows, it might be backwards.
Yeah, above it.
Sorry.
Forward or backward?
I think it needs to be backwards if you're using a Windows. I forgot to put that in. I was yeah. It'll error if that wasn't right. Okay, so now you type the name of your data file.
I go to the name of the data file.
You type it in. So you were typing it before.
Routine.
Yes.
And maybe mention if you press tab, it automatically can fill it out for you as well.
I can guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
If I try tab.
Well, let's just go with this for now. Let's try pressing enter.
Okay.
Okay. I feel like it might be forward slash. So I want you to use the up arrow on your keyboard.
I use the forward slash.
Yeah, so right now your cursor. Okay, or you can do that. Yeah.
I copy it down.
Yeah.
I use forward slash.
Try forward slash and press enter. Okay, great. So now what I want you to do is on your keyboard, I want you to press the up arrow. Can you see the arrows on your keyboard? Yes, okay. Now I want you to go to the front of the line right before read.csv.
Front, this side?
Yeah, you can use that. You can either put your cursor and click on the beginning of the line or use the arrow.
Beginning of the line?
Yes.
I beg your pardon? Beginning of the line or end of the line?
The beginning, right before read. Right there.
Okay.
Yes. Now I want you to give this data a name. What do you want to call it?
Okay.
Yep.
No. Okay. Yes, good. Go with underscore. Better. Data class 2. Okay. So after the 2, I want you to delete the other underscore. Yeah, delete that. And then I want you to use a space. Yeah. And now you need to make the assignment operator, which is 2 keys. It's the little like sideways caret. I don't know how to describe that. but Juniper's gonna put it in the chat. So it's like the little sideways triangle and then the dash.
Which one on my key? I'm trying to figure out where it's supposed to be found on my key. It's not this one.
It should be next. It's the one that's the reverse of that. So facing the other direction. Yes. And now a dash. Yes. Yep. Okay, I want you to do another space. The space isn't necessary, but it's good practice. Yes. Okay, now press enter. Great. Yay. So now in your environment, you have a data object. You did great.
Okay, interesting.
Do you understand the assignment bit? Because I think that's can be a little bit tricky. If you want to just type it, or maybe just demonstrate it that like we say A.
Yeah,
assign 1
I can
to
demonstrate
A.
a few more things. So
Yeah, that would be
maybe do you want to maybe stop your screen share for now?
I think you can start sharing it.
Oh, okay. So I'm gonna share, and actually I was gonna do this anyway and send you guys a record, like the rest of a recording, but I can just do it now because we're recording.
Yes.
Okay. So we've done this. Okay. But I want to do it again. So what Juniper was just mentioning was practicing with saving objects. We can do so not just by reading in data, but by typing things in here. You can see that what I was testing here, because originally you were giving your data frame a name that had hyphens, and I thought, I don't think that's allowed. And I was right. I wanted to try it, and it said, this doesn't work because it's thinking that the hyphen is a minus sign, like 7 minus 5, which is 2. So it didn't like the hyphen in the name because it thought that it was a subtraction symbol. Anyway, okay, so I can do 7 minus 5 in my console, and we have 2, but it hasn't created an object in my environment. Instead, I can say 7 minus 2 and save this. And it has produced a value in my environment with the value of 2. And now what I can do
Or just say 7 minus 2, but you type 7 minus 5.
Oh, right.
That's
Okay, I'll fix it.
yeah.
7 minus, oh,
2.
oh, wait, I'm going to change the name. 7 minus 5. Wait, yeah. Oh, okay, and they're the same. Okay, and now I have two objects that have the same value. That's annoying. Well, it's fine. Okay. Now what we can do is 7 minus 5 minus 4.
And that's minus.
And it's minus 2. And we can do 7 minus 5 plus 10, etc. But what we can see is that this minus 2 object and this 12 object are not saved in our environment. And none of these are saved in our script. So if we need them for some reason, we need to type it out here. Any questions on that difference between what's happening in the two locations? Okay, I'm going to keep going then, and just because we have the recording going. So I know you guys did this in your Excel workshop, that you looked at different ways to observe a data set. We can do the same in R. And we already have red in our data set. It's sitting here. Actually, I have it twice because I renamed it. I'm going to tidy up my workspace a little. I'm going to say I want to use the name data because it's shorter and easier for me to type. And I want to remove some objects. So I'm going to do that with the remove function, which can be useful if you've just got a cluttered environment. I'm going to remove 7 minus 2, and I'm going to remove malaria data. Okay, so now I want to explore my data. The first thing I want to do is just take a look at the first section of the data, the first rows of the data. So this is one of the main differences between read CSV and read.csv. So data base R. Let me copy this. When we have read the data using the tidyverse function, it shows us a summary of the data with just the columns that fit neatly into our window. And then it tells us there's 10 more variables. If we use the same function head with the data that was read in using base R, it's going to give us the first 6 rows of all the columns. So this is either useful or annoying depending on how big your data is, but it's worth noting. I couldn't remember one of the differences between the two functions, and there is one of them.
So with read underscore CSV, that's a table object. We can do that. Yes. So it's just a different data format. And this is something that we'll keep coming across in our that it just looks a little bit different.
Yeah. Okay. But going back to our tidyverse version, we can also look at structure. So it's got this little funny function named called str, stands for structure. Okay. So what we can see is that each of the columns are named here. And then it tells us some useful information, telling us what kind of values are in that column. CHR is shorthand for character versus NUM, which stands for number. It tells us the dimensions of that column of the data and gives us a sampling of the first handful of entries in that column. we're going to ignore this column that has the chaotic additional information. Out of curiosity, I'm going to do the same on our base R version. It doesn't have that. I don't know what it means. Okay, the next thing we're going to look at is summary. And I think something that's really useful here is that I don't have the cleaned version of the data because I didn't clean it. And so that gives me the benefit of being able to look at a few things that I think you guys looked at in Excel. For example, the year. It says that the minimum value for year is 18. That feels wrong. And that the maximum year is 3018. So I'm guessing that when you guys did the Excel workshop, you manually or programmatically fixed those values. This is just showing you that you can evaluate some of these data issues as well using the summary command. Okay, so that's what we were showing here with this set of functions. And I want to show you one last command in R just to whet your appetite for the next workshop, which is filtering your data set. So if you want to filter it to match a certain condition, then we're going to use a function helpfully called filter. We're going to need a few arguments. The first includes the name of the dataset object. So just to be clear, this says data because we saved our object with the name data. If we were somebody else on this call, I can't remember, what was it called? Malaria class. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh no, I can't do this because I have stuff hidden. Well, this is your actual data name. This isn't some like generic word. Filter has to be exactly the word filter, but this is a find and replace adventure with what you named your data. And then the next thing is the column name that you want to filter by. This again is dependent on the column names in your data set. So because we just did an exploration of our data, we know, we didn't look at this one, but I can show you another one, names of data, that we have these column names. One of them is month. So if our data set didn't have the column month, we couldn't filter by that variable. But it does. So we say month. We use this funny little thing, which is a double equal sign, which means it's not equal to, because it's not like a mathematical value. It's sort of saying it's the same as or equivalent to, sort of a different way of saying this equals this, but it doesn't actually equal it because it's not a mathematical sort of equal. Do you have another note on what that symbology means?
Yeah, I think it's like exact match. The double equation, I think.
Match. Earlier in my slides, or later, I don't remember, where I said tidyverse does not equal R, I actually hid some R code in there. It's embedded inside of my brain. And I used not equal. So that's saying anything that is not what's coming next. So that's just a little note. And then the last thing that we need to put in here is what is the condition we want to match? And in this case, I decided I want to have the cases in January. So how do I know that this is the right term to use? Well, I had previously examined my data. And I want to take a look at it. So I want to say, what did we look at already? Structure. Here in month, I can see that January, Jan, with a capital J, is one of the options for a value for month. So that's why I can put Jan here in quotation marks. We need an equal match for months with Jan. And the last thing, as we've gotten accustomed to, is that we want to save this new filtered object with an assignment operator to a new a new thing that we're going to call Jan data. Okay, I'm going to quickly show you this just for the sake of the recording. So we have data, Jan data, January data. Nope, that's not right. Filter it. Filter what? Filter data. Filter by what? We want to filter month. And we want to say month must be equal to, I'm going to do a lowercase jan just so we can see what happens. Now, Jan is not, Jan with a lowercase j is not a valid version of the month, but we didn't get an error. What can we see here? There are 0 rows that match this filter. So if we take a look now at Jan data, there's nothing. So this is risky, I suppose you can think of it that way. It's a valid filter, but it has produced 0 results because there are none that match that name. Instead, I must change this to be appropriate to the value recorded in the data set. We can see it's changed, and we now have 100 observations that match our filter. All right, so again, just for the sake of the recording, this is the last note. I wanted to talk about this because it's sort of something I care about. We've talked about how the benefit of using R is sharing with your colleagues. And so to assist with that, don't write messy code, okay? So there's a lot of different ways to write the code. As we started to see, the spaces are optional. So I could write a assignment operator, filter data, month equals. But it's a lot harder to read and understand this than when there are helpful spaces around the operators and a useful and interesting name that helps us understand the object. So use descriptive names, use the spaces. So that's this. This is harder to read. I should have gotten rid of even more of the spaces. I have colleagues that write like this, and it's a nightmare. Instead, you want to be a little wordier, I encourage you, because it means that later when you read your own code, you'll be able to remember, what is this doing? What was I doing here?
If I can add, I do entertain myself with naming these things like, yay, data merge worked or something like that. Because again, it's completely up to you how you name objects. And they're like, oh no, this still needs help or something like that. So you can have some fun in R, definitely.
But be descriptive, but like remember that if an object name is very long, you're gonna have to be repeating it constantly. So, within reason. Okay, we already took a look at this. So I'll skip back this, and that was everything. So
fantastic. Thank you so much. There's so much in R, and I'm sure that we could keep going, and there's so many different functions and preferences and everything. I don't know, with Phoebe and Oscar, is this your first time really using R at the moment? Yes. So how did you find this?
One moment. Okay.
Yeah, yes, it's our first time. But the session was exciting and hoping to learn more and more.
great.
Yeah, for me, it's interesting, but too many instructions. It's not like Stata. You just go and save and start running your data. Yeah, the tidy things that you need to take care of.
Yeah, I think certainly that's why maybe it feels like we didn't do a lot of code today, but I think it's because package management and file paths are two of the biggest stress points with using R. So if you can get comfortable with how to understand file paths and where the file is located and how do you, point to the right places, and you can get used to the package system, The rest of it is a lot simpler in the sense that you're just writing and executing code. But you're absolutely right that there is that finicky step. And that is part of why we spend so much time on it today, because a lot of people want to hide that pain from beginners, and they start by showing their screen and showing code and going 5 plus 10. And then here you can do multiplication and you can do this and you can do that. And then people go to open their own data and they can't even open their file. So I hope that what's going to happen now is that the harder part has become easier, and you can start to actually copy existing code, and it's going to feel easier rather than the reverse. I make it look easy and you find the hard stuff later.
Interesting.
I guess on that note, I mean, there's a lot of code available online. And in terms of being able to copy and paste sort of and make things work, the most common issues with making that work are whether you have the right version of a package or a function, and yeah, like where your data is pointing to or something. So if those issues aren't a problem, you should be able to copy and paste code pretty easily. The only other thing that I should note is it's very easy for your environment to not match your script. So as I showed before, if I change this and I decide I actually want this to be malaria data, and then I start writing code that's down here, and I say, okay, I want to say that my January data is filtered from my malaria data. You know, various things will happen if you don't keep things up to date between the two. And the reason I'm saying that then, the solution sort of, is in global options. I usually start with this and I forgot. Often people's workspaces are set up as a default to save all of the data that has been created in the environment. This is a risky thing to do, and I'll explain why. If you save all of this environment data, and every time you reopen your project, it's sitting there for you, it's very, very easy for your script to become out of date with what actually the script can create. So if now let's say that I create January data, not with the malaria data, but with the regular data. But in my script, it's still using malaria data. Okay, so I write here this code, and I think, great, I don't know, I've got this handled, and then later I say Jan data, or maybe I don't have this written here at all, and I say Jan data, and I want to, you know, get rid of a row or get rid of a column, and I say I want to make a new filter, and make it, I don't know, I can't think of what I want to do. I want to say, oh, I don't like the first row of Jan data. It's not correct. I want to replace it with, you know, only rows 2 to 5. I'm sorry for introducing a structure you guys haven't learned, but I want to illustrate that if I put this in the script and it relies on the existence of Jan data, I can run this now and it works because Jan data has been produced and is sitting here. But if I save this script and I give this to a colleague, it's not going to work because January data is not created in the script. So if I open up and I restart my R session, my environment is empty. I'm starting from scratch, and I try and run this file. I'm going to use my Command Enter to run these lines. It attaches tidyverse, and it reads my data, and it tries to subset. It can't do it because Jan data doesn't exist. So the risk that people face if they save their global environment constantly and reopen the session with all of these objects here is they end up with a script file that doesn't reflect all of the steps actually needed in the analysis. So a lot of times beginners end up working this way where they have an environment that's got 50 objects in it. Some of them they don't even know how they got there. And that sort of flies in the face of the whole point of adding this tool to your workflow, which is to avoid this issue of not being able to retrace your steps. So I encourage you, if it's not already unticked, to say, don't save my workplace, and go with the sort of slightly more scary pain of saying, every time I open this project, the things that I need to run the code to get them, or I need to save intermediate objects, which you guys will probably address later. So I can save this intermediate object so that next time if I want to start working again, I can start from somewhere moving forward. So you can save an intermediate object, and I won't go into that now. I just want to say there are risks to using this software and letting your environment get too crowded. Are there any questions on that?
This is something probably, like, as you're working in it, you might come across this, or whichever you're like, yeah, this whole script and console and the environment and everything, you'll get to see it, like when you're missing things out, if you have a script and you're unable to reproduce it and everything.
Yeah, it's another reason why I tried to highlight at the beginning to keep your raw data here, so that if at some point you realize, I don't know what I've done, I've created a monster, I've filtered 6 times and it's not what I expected, you can use your script and start again from sort of fresh. And that script should be the marker of the roadmap of exactly how to come back to where you were. And like, in case you get somewhere and you realize, I've created an intermediate data file with mistakes, or I've overwritten something, I've deleted January, I need it back. Yeah. Was there a hand raised just now I saw? No.
I think
Let's go.
Thank you so much again. I hope that, with our you all have a beautiful experience with R and become friends with it and everything. It is like a relationship, ups and downs. Sometimes R doesn't make sense, or maybe it's just
most of the time.
Yes, yeah. So it can take a bit of time. Yeah, Kokoda.
Yeah, so I have a question regarding the mentorship program.
Yeah.
I would like to know if this mentorship program is it going to be only for this in this training, or in short, how long is the mentorship program?
So it is part of the cohort. So we are going to be wrapping things up by the end of June. So that's how long your mentors have signed up for this program to be your mentors. But this will be, again, like, if you want to keep the mentorship going, you can keep chatting with them, and it could be long term. Again, that will be up to you. But at the moment, we kind of recruited mentors until the end of this program.
Okay, well, thank you.
Have you chatted with Amelia or not yet?
I told you. And the other question, you said I am the one who is supposed to set up the meeting. You mean I have to arrange to send the invitation?
Yes, yeah. So you email that, like, oh, Amelia, fantastic to meet you. I can't wait to chat with you. What time would be best for you? Like, what day for our first chat? And like, you have access to Teams probably, but if like either Google Meetup, or if anyone needs a hand, I can set it up on Zoom as well, your chats. It's up to you guys. But yeah, so it's you who's asking the mentor, when do you have time for a chat, and they'll set it up.
Yeah, I did that one. No problem. Thank
Yeah.
you so much. Does anyone else have questions? Drop my hand. Where
Go ahead.
is the reaction? Sarah, no question. Okay, I think there is no one else has question.
Do you have a question from Windex?
Yes. Sorry, just on our screen. How do you play around the console and the other screens if you want to rearrange them?
I think if you go to Tool at the top, View, Tool. I'll just show you.
If I go to
So Tools here, Global Options. I think it's this one, Pane Layout. And then I can say, you know, here I want to have a different one. But I don't want to change it because I'm scared. I've had it one way for a long time.
Yes, so and
because for me my source is closed. I only have the console, the environment, and the
So I'll just show you. If I close this file, it looks like my source is closed as well, just because I don't have a file open. But if you open File by clicking this button and creating a new R script, your source should open.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good. Thank you for that. And then saving, do I save, go to environment, save, go to source, save, or it's just Control S?
To save. So I would encourage you to be saving scripts and not so much saving your workspace or your environment.
Okay.
Yeah. So if this is my script, then I can save it. I just, sorry for that. I clicked Command S, but you can also click this little button or say File Save. And then, you know, you can save this as, you know, whatever you want.
Okay. So I can just run the scripts, then everything will come back.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. And then if you want to go to another project right there, where do you go? You want to go to another project while keeping working on this?
Yes. So you can open project in new session. You just say open project, then it's going to close this one and open the other one. So if you say open project in new session, and then you have to go look for it, and I don't know, I have one here. Click on it, and I have to click this .rproj file, and I can open it. And then I have a second RStudio window open. That's quite chaotic.
Okay, thank you.
And ideally, you would have one RStudio project for different projects. So, you know, if you have multiple projects that share scripts, it might make sense to save them within the same project.
Okay. Thank you. This is all for me. Thank you so much for today. R will be the theme of my graduation from this course.
Excellent.
Thank you so much.
Great to meet you.
Yeah. Thank you. I didn't do my my video. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
That's okay. Sometimes it's hard if you have low connection.
Yes.
Yay! It's
Thank
always
you.
good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, thank you so much.
Thank
And
you.
thank you for asking questions, because it's so hard that we are in Australia and we want to help and we're not quite sure if people are able to
Yes,
come.
and I don't want to miss this opportunity
Exactly.
because the next session I'll be teaching students, and so yeah, it will be a waste of time if I miss this. This is the only time I have.
Yeah. Well, we're
Yes,
glad we
before
don't
I
want to
begin, I've seen on your laptop they were like Python, blah blah. Yeah, so I hope to get there.
on mine. No Python on mine. Is there?
I saw you were opening. Yeah, I saw some Python, some sort of Python.
Maybe. I don't know.
If you would like to see just something how it looks for me, what I've been
Okay.
working on. So you can see, I think you can see it as well. This like my bit of script, if you want to see.
Okay.
Like
Too
It's
long.
it's
Don't
inti it's intimidative to a beginner right now.
yeah, it's the only thing. Everyone has a different like style and everything. And like I work with like our shiny apps a lot, and everything. And it looks a bit different for us, but yeah, just
Yeah.
it would show.
Basically, with all of these things, there's so many ways to do everything, which is an opportunity and a struggle at the beginning because you want to be told this is the way, but there's no one way, frankly.
Sure.
Well, thank you so much again, and
Thank you. Have a good day. It's 10 a.m. here.
Okay.
Yeah, it's 6 p.m. for us, so it's
Yeah.
go
for dinner.
So have a fantastic
Sure.
week, and we'll see you. Well, I will see you on Monday next week.
Thank you. See you on Monday. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.